Sounds good.
Yeah, I like being in back.
That's the way else. That way for a while. Baby, crazy.
That was just as
That's
hot.
expensive. Whoa. You know, I looked at some of the numbers. I think we were out of.
Yeah, I think.
Hey,
How you doing?
good.
Good afternoon, everybody. Friday afternoon. I'm glad some of you are here. I'd like to introduce Admiral Lou Smith. Admiral Smith is the civil engineer of the Navy, probably more appropriately the public works officer of the Navy. And we asked Admiral Smith to come down here to give a little bit of his Friday afternoon to put some perspective on this wire service story we saw this morning about Y2K, the Y2K readiness, if you will, of some cities around the United States that have Navy, Marine Corps facilities in the region. And Admiral Smith will try to get some perspective on this situation for you, because it's something that we need to appropriately frame, and he's the guy that can do it.
Thank you, Tom. Happy Friday afternoon, everyone. Again, I'm Lou Smith. I'm officially the commander of the Naval Facilities Engineering Command. Having spent the last 31 years of my life in the Navy shore establishment, it's a pleasure to be able to get up here and talk to you this afternoon. I read the wire service article this morning, and I started thinking back to this database that's referenced in it, and want to emphasize that what's mentioned in there is really something we started over a year ago within the Navy as a database to track our progress on getting ready for Y2K ashore. We, of course, like everyone else in America, is a service receiver in what are called utilities, things like electricity, water, some cases natural gas, sewage, things of these nature. As we got ready, we realized it was not enough just to worry about our systems inside the fence line, but also about our service providers. So we went out and tasked all of our shore activities, and again, we're in large metropolitan areas in America and small metropolitan areas, as well as forward deployed around the world, and we tasked them to go out and talk to their local utility companies. Well, the bases began doing this, and we realized that we here in Washington, of course, had no visibility of what was going on in all of these actions. So we set up a database, as we're prone to do here in the Pentagon, and we started populating the database. At first, of course, you start with a blank sheet of paper. We went out to our field activities and said, look, if you're doing something, just tell us you're doing something, and we're going to have this system where it goes from 1 to 3, where 0 or 1 is the best and 3 is the worst. So if you don't know yet, or if you only have preliminary information, put in a 3, because we'll always default to the worst case scenario. So this database began now about a year ago, went from a blank sheet of paper to something that was almost exclusively populated by all these 3s. And I've been able to watch it over that year and look at it as it gets updated, and you could see it progress. Things would progress from 3s to 2s to 1s, and now it's predominantly populated by things where there's really very little or no probability of any problems. Almost predominantly 1. And if you ever were to watch this over time, you would see that the 3s become 2s and the 2s become 1. And when I read this article this morning, I thought, one, someone has looked at a very old edition of this database, and they've extrapolated from it dramatically, because that isn't what it said, that isn't what it means, and oh, by the way, that isn't where it is now. So in your handouts in those blue folders, I believe you all have copies of a couple of our more recent runs, and if we can get it off the computer in the next hour or two here, we'll give you the latest update as that occurs. And I think you'll find that, again, it's a good news story that continues to get better, and I think it's a measure not just of the good planning efforts that have been done by the Navy in preparing for Y2K ashore over the last several years, but also it's a measure of how well prepared the local communities are in these critical utility areas. So with that, I didn't want to sit here and just talk to all of you this afternoon. I'd like to handle any questions I might from the floor. The only thing I would ask you is two things. I apologize, but I'm a poor dumb civil engineer, and I'm not the right person to ask very technical or detailed questions about the operating side of the Navy. Again, I'm the ashore guy, I'm the public works guy. And as you'll see from your sheets, there's lots and lots of data. Again, we have a lot of activities around the nation and around the world. I'll be glad to take questions and get you answers on instant cases and instant basis, but I'm afraid I can't remember off the top of my head what the exact conditions are at every site. So with that, yes, ma'am.
Okay, well, can you just summarize what the latest data says about the readiness for Y2K related to utilities and water around the country?
If you'd like a one-line summary, I'd have to say that I don't think we have a problem with utilities in CONUS.
And just to continue that, there's no place where the Navy has a substantial installation that you've targeted as a site we got to worry about because they're not doing what they need to be doing. There's no base anywhere, or is there, where you've said, wait, we would be on guard at this spot?
I would answer your instant question as yes. I would say we don't have to worry. But are we concerned? Are we tracking? Are we monitoring? And you'll see that as this progresses, things will go from a 3 to a 2 to a 1. And part of this involves written certifications. Part of it is you're a 2, you could be a 1 if you made the following small changes. And that's the progression of this. But having done this for 31 years, I don't think we have a worry here. I really do not.
The Navy report conflicts at all or is consistent with the White House report that came out recently, which was essentially very optimistic?
I would say that and again, it's a database. I would say the Navy database is right in sync with what the White House has said, frankly. That's what we've found as we've gone out to the local utility companies and other providers all across America.
You see, if you look at some of the reporting, and there's been very little of it so far, but if you look at the reporting on this situation, you see that there are an awful lot of cities that got the lowest marks, the worst marks possible. Why is that?
I would tell you, I don't think we were marking cities. Again, I think you had to look at what was the default position. If you didn't know, if you hadn't gotten back formal confirmation from your local provider, some cases a city, some cases a region, then it went to the default 3 position. That was not a judgment on the cities or their capabilities, because again, I don't think we'll have a problem with that.
How many of those that have the lowest mark, got the lowest mark because you're aware that there's a problem rather than getting the lowest mark for simply not having submitted a response?
I'm not aware that any got a 3, and I'm not sure we have any 3s left in CONUS as of right now today. I'm not sure any of them got 3s because we thought that there was a problem. I really don't. I think it was all just incomplete data from my knowledge of it.
Admiral, are there any red flags on any community?
Now, again, you're asking me a lot of detail on something that I'm not sure I have enough brain cells left to remember. Not that I'm aware of, and again, it depends on a red flag. You got to remember our bases tend to be very small to very large tracts of land. Occasionally we may have a remote site or something that some more work has to be done to get it to be Y2K compliant, but that's not the sort of thing we can't fix and aren't fixing even as we speak. So,
Doing the same thing.
yes, sir, they are.
If I'm understanding you right, all this data in the database was based on what these utilities told you. This was not the Navy doing its own assessment. It was asking them for their assessment, and you're recording in a database what they told you.
It's actually both. I would tell you that we go out with a rather complex survey to them. They answer the survey questions. We do, again, we don't own all the wires in a metropolitan area, so we look at the feeders that we have. But we've really had no problem with correlating the data at all. We really have not. I mean, it's turned out to be just exactly as everybody said it was. I would tell you, just like many of these things, there are lawyers involved, so occasionally people will make sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed before they sign back a formal certification, but it really has not been a problem.
Was this database supposed to be public? Was this posted on a website at one point?
I believe it was. I go out there, I understand that it was, yes, sir.
Posted on a website at one point, and then it was removed from the website. Do you know why it was removed from the website?
I do not know, to tell you the truth, but Tom?
It was removed from the website when the data that was contained in this document. The web page was removed when the data was being assessed by this individual who was preparing this newsletter, and he was totally misrepresenting the data. And we felt it was in our best interest to remove the web page at that point. And we are prepared to put the web page back up.
So what was, how old was the data that he was working from? When did that date from?
I would probably have to say probably a couple months. And as Admiral Smith has said, we have seen tremendous progress. I mean, we started, as the Admiral said, from a blank sheet of paper to the point now where we've basically got a clean bill of health right across the board.
Admiral, you meant, I mean, looking at this real quickly, most of them seem to be ones, but there are a lot of twos and threes. Twos say it's probable that there'll be a problem.
And again, I think
there's
that's
dozens of them.
I think it's a progression. It really is a progression. If you, again, look at this complex form that the utility companies answer, there are things you can change that will change your ranking without an awful lot of effort. Sometimes, and again, systems have become very complex anymore. There are systems within subsystems. There are, believe it or not, electric meters in America that have chips in them that they use as part of their system to monitor how to correct your bill. Well, that doesn't keep you from getting electricity, but if the chip's not Y2K compliant, maybe your bill won't be as accurate as it should. But those, again, are things, you'll see them progress from 3s to 2s to 1s over time.
The point is that you're confident that those that are now 2s and 3s will become 1s.
And that's been a progression. I mean,
report does show that a lot of them are 2s and 3s.
and again, I don't know the data that, you may have a couple of different dates on those reports in there, but, okay.
Admiral, there's a classification, I think in the most recent one, it's 819, I suppose that's,
Okay.
that's the most recent one. That's you, and also, that's you, and I was wondering what that means.
That was a progression. I believe the U is one where we don't know. Go to the bottom of the last page is where I think all the codes are explained. No, go to the page. Are they there?
Oh, unknown.
Yeah. And we came up with that when people said, look, you know, this makes it look awful that the default is always, we think there's a failure, because we don't think there's going to be a failure. We just don't know yet. So we went from having a straight 3 to a 3P, and now fill in with a U if you don't know yet.
So these were announced as you, before that would have said 3, is that right?
That's right. That's right. And that's just refining of the database. Again, this has been a working tool for over a year now.
What about installations not in CONUS overseas? I see at one of the sheets they have some overseas things. What's the assessment of those?
Those are going very well. I think we'll be all right overseas also. You know, again, it's a sensitive subject overseas, and we're always, you know, working with the local governments as well as working with our local service providers. But my assessment would be that'll be all right also. I don't see any critical problems over there.
Is the Navy planning to cancel leaves on the 31st, to bring extra people in the event of trouble, have staffing on bases that evening? I mean, or the following day? Are those plans being made at this point?
I can't speak for the whole Navy, but I'm not aware of any plans to do things like that unless we find in our planning that it'd be warranted to have extra people on board. We certainly are not planning to do that, you know, in our ashore utilities branches right now, because again, I don't think we'll have a problem.
If you had to rate the military world or the Navy world versus the civilian world in terms of Y2K readiness, which would you say is in better shape?
That's hard for a poor, dumb civil engineer from Milwaukee to do. I really don't know. I mean, I think the country's doing a good job of planning overall, but I would turn to my colleague, Admiral Jarowski, to answer that question.
Chris, I can try to answer that question for you. Our battle groups for the past year have been undergoing battle group situations, BG sits as we call them, where Y2K has been tested on various systems throughout the battle force units, and we have had tremendous success across the board. Little minor glitches here and there, but clearly our units, our battle force, battle group units are ready, and we've proven that consistently. In fact, we just finished one not too long ago with the Constellation, which is now deployed, getting ready to go over into the Persian Gulf. We had an East Coast carrier that recently underwent some Y2K testing, did extremely well. So we have a lot of confidence. We've also tested, for example, the Tomahawk, the cruise missile. which, as you know, has been a weapon system that we have become very reliant upon. And in each and every time we have tested that system for Y2K, we have done very well. So we have a lot of confidence.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Okay,
much, everyone.
thank you all.
Thanks for coming down.
Yeah, that's okay.